Go ahead, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Schifrin, Chairman of the Townsend Housing Authority. And we're having an informal discussion this evening. There is not a quorum present. And we are being tape recorded. We have veterans agents that are here this evening as guests. And we're hoping to get information to further our project for veterans housing here in Townsend. So first this evening, I would like to actually go around the room, Hartley, if you wouldn't mind, and have each person present introduce themselves and what position they're representing for the town. And again, I'm Laura Schifrin, the Chairman of Townsend Housing Authority. Chaz?
My name is Chaz Sexton Duranian. I'm the state-appointed rep to the board nominee, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
And I am Sheila Harrington, state representative for Townsend, and have worked with the Housing Authority for the last year or so, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's more than 2 years.
More than, yeah, 2 years on this project. So.
Yeah. And Michelle?
Michelle Dakota, Land Use Department here in Townsend.
Kathy?
Kathy Arujo, resident.
With a lot of knowledge. And gentlemen, would you please state your name and position?
My name is Russell Jobe. I'm the, here in the Townsend, at the Townsend VFW, representing the veterans.
Russ?
I'm Russ Moore. I'm here representing the veterans. I'm a Vietnam veteran myself, and I'm here representing the veterans. I've been a member of Townsend VFW for close to 50 years.
Keith Jackson. I am a member of the Townsend Post VFW. I'm also the state senior vice commander.
Paul Martin, living here in Townsend. I'm the post commander for Post 6538 and still serving in the military, so I haven't retired yet.
Brian?
And Brian Warnerman, 135 Highland Street, member of the Townsend American Legion, a commander, and I'm also a VFW member.
Thank you all for being here. We're looking forward to your participation, and I want to thank you on behalf of all of us for your service to our country. Totally appreciated, and appreciate that you're here this evening. Chaz is going to begin this evening with a little bit of history of the past 2 years and how we got to this point.
Briefly, we have a affordable housing plan for the town of Townsend that was approved by the Board of Selectmen a year ago. And in that, we have a parcel of land currently that we are looking to place a facility on that would increase our affordable housing for the town of Townsend. With this, our discussions about 2 years ago were that there was a sector population that we felt needed a little bit of our attention, and that's for the veterans. We, at that time, we had enlisted the services of State Representative Sheila Harrington to kind of point us in the right direction on where we need to go to go forward with a project of this type. Since then, and in the 2 years, we've looked at the land that's available to us. We're looking at services and how we are to appropriate such a project. And right now, we're at a point where we wanted the town of Townsend to be aware of what our plans are, and B, we're actually looking for input. We're looking for all the input we possibly can to be able to move forward with such an aggressive project, I think, of what we're doing. We have a lot of interest, and we definitely have the people to move this forward. And I guess that's kind of where we are right now.
And just so that everyone knows, it's part of our charge as the Housing Authority to increase the affordable housing in Townsend. And our last project was Townsend Woods, which added 36 units to our count. And now we're looking to hopefully add as much as 50 units again, only now it would be for veterans housing and services, which hopefully will be brought up in later in our conversation. Sheila?
Okay, thank you. And I know tonight some of you might be disappointed, as I am, that Mr. Radka couldn't be here. And he thought he had sent me a message. He said he must not have hit send, but he did not. And so therefore we would have probably rescheduled tonight had we known that. So I apologize. I'm sure he'll come at another date soon. But essentially, as the other two have mentioned, they sort of reached out to me a couple of years ago. And at that point, we were throwing around ideas basically with regard to that extra parcel of land that could be used for affordable housing and potentially the Veterans Project. And what we wanted to accomplish is something that would not just be like a senior veterans housing, or, you know, we wanted something that would be multi-use so that we could accommodate possibly veterans with young families, people that are coming back now, as well as those that may need more accommodations. And to that end, we sort of looked at the land we have. We met with one group initially just about process, sort of a housing development group. After that, we reached out and had the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development came out here to Townsend, as well as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs this past fall. They took a tour of the land, and it was their very strong recommendation that we start to deal with Mr. Radka, John Radka, at Veterans Outreach Center. And I would encourage any of you to to look up this Northeast Veterans Outreach Center, and they have various housing projects, and they've sort of they've met with us the last meeting that we had, and they indicated that they also felt that one of the components that we sort of hadn't delved into enough was the services and potentially the assisted living component. That with senior veterans, we may need to have an assisted living component, which makes a lot of sense. And I heard earlier, just in the informal discussion before we got really started, Keith, you talking about the VA medical services and the access to the VA medical services and the importance of that. It is my understanding that there are some VA medical services that are available in Fitchburg.
There is.
There is, okay. And obviously Bedford and then the ones closer to Boston. But I think that's why we wanted to have this meeting, because, you know, when he said to us assisted living, we kind of, you know, we were thinking we need to give services. We hadn't really thought the full gamut of the assisted living. So the beauty of having Veterans Outreach Center involved in this is that they're not just an entity that develops housing projects. They are an entity that develops veterans programs and veterans projects, and they have several housing projects already. But they know how to do it. They know sort of the nuts and bolts of what veterans need. But they also encouraged us to have, I mean, it's crazy for, I don't think we could say it enough, like how much we appreciate your service, but having not being a veteran, I wouldn't ever, act as if I knew what you wanted or you needed without getting input from you. We obviously need to hear from you. That's the most important thing. But the hope of it is that there aren't really any, outside of Haverhill and then in Worcester, there really are not any veterans housing projects. And more especially, we don't think there's an access to veterans housing for younger veterans that may be coming back trying to get a start going, and it's tough, and this may be an opportunity for some of our local newer veterans to have a place so that they can stay in a community like Townsend. So that's our hope. So when we originally sort of thought of it, we thought of potentially having sort of two separate, and I don't know, maybe Chaz, you can explain sort of more what we were thinking. We were doing more of like a townhome style and then a
one big facility.
Yeah, and then so we probably would expect that one big facility would have an assisted living component if possible, and that the townhome ends of it would be, like I said, for the young veterans with families. So we understand that, and one of the things that was kind of hard when we were talking to people in the beginning, they said, well, what's your accessibility to services here in Townsend, like regional transportation and what can you walk to? And although you can walk to the library and the senior center from this area, especially if we get some help with the conservation people to put a pathway from that land over to the other land, you know, we're not the city of Boston. We're not the city of Worcester. We don't offer a lot of the same things. So, unfortunately, those types of access things are things we're going to have to work on with the Veterans Administration. I don't know that we could completely do it through this project, as far as we would have to reach out beyond Veterans Outreach to the actual, you know, Veterans Department of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to try to work on a way to get more resources, especially in the world of transportation. But it's important. I wrote that note down, and that's something that we could call Secretary Rayner's office and say, look, you've been out in Townsend now, you've seen where we are. So you know that we are not on the green line or anything out here. We've got to get some help if we're going to be able to give people access to services out here, outside of what you're already going to be able to get through MART or, you know, other resources that may be available to seniors or whatever. We have to have something more specific and outside of Veterans Outreach. But I guess we kind of want to know that what specifically are your concerns? So transportation has been mentioned as one of them, and hopefully, you know, the idea as a whole appeals to you as veterans, but we want your input on specifics that we maybe haven't thought about.
Well, going back to the transportation real quick, and the reason why that's vital is getting the veterans to the VA is the big issue. I don't want nobody to have the false impression, I think I was very clear when we were just talking earlier. These veterans are not going to Bedford. Please don't think that that's where they're going. That's the closest. But if they have any other type of ailment, most likely they're going to either Brockton or Jamaica Plains.
Really?
Most likely Jamaica Plains. Most of all my appointments are at Jamaica Plains.
Really?
And my primary care is at Bedford.
Wow.
So this is the issue. We just had a veteran, and I brought this up a little earlier. And I like to tell stories because I think it drives home the point a little bit better. And I told the story a little earlier. We had a veteran from our post, from the Townsend VFW post, that he had to go to Jamaica Plains on a regular. He had stage 4 cancer. He was going through chemotherapy, so forth and so on. Well, he can't just hop in a car and drive himself. So this was really stressful in this guy. I used to talk to him, and he said, you know, the hardest thing, he says, Keith, you can fix anything with the VFW. If you have any influence, you got to get transportation so it's easier for us. And he said the transportation is what was the worst part. He didn't look forward to go and get those treatments because he was very hesitant, because he had to find somebody to drive him.
So like I said, that was an important thing that we were thinking of with regard to the project, that would be a service we'd want to offer, is some kind of transportation. Transportation to Jamaica Plain is different than obviously Bedford or Fitchburg. So we need to really reach out to Secretary Rayner's office on those types of issues. And then what I can also do, because I want to say that Veterans Outreach has like a property in Northborough. Well, I guess that's closer to Worcester, but they don't, not all of their properties, I don't believe, are in an urban setting. And they've got some out in the Springfield area, but obviously there's a pretty big VA hospital out in the Springfield area too. So that's really something I think we need to approach with completely even aside of this.
Absolutely.
Even if we didn't have a housing project, we need to talk to the Veterans Administration in Massachusetts with regard to how to provide more access to treatment.
And they do have buses. You go to different locations, they have buses. But here's the problem. The bus leaves at 3. If your appointment runs over, you miss that bus.
You're out.
How do you get home? Because there is no other transportation.
What types of services are available in Fitchburg? Is there nothing much there? Or?
That's what I'm saying, is I think if we grouped Leominster, Fitchburg, and then everything up in this area, and maybe had some type of shuttle that could move them from here, maybe to Bedford, and then they get on another bus from Bedford to Jamaica Plains.
But that's still a hassle.
It is, but it's better than being in stage 4 cancer,
Right.
trying to
They-
call
Trying to go to
everybody you know to
Jamaica.
get a ride so you can get a treatment.
They
Right.
really don't have much in Fitchburg because that's more of a satellite than anything else. And it's so far out because everything else is centralized near the Boston area. So that's why it makes it difficult.
Are you able to, I know, isn't there a Southern New Hampshire Veterans Hospital, but do you have to be a New Hampshire resident
No,
to
you can,
access services?
if you're eligible in the VA, you can go to any VA medical center.
Okay,
So the myth that you can only go to the one in your town or in your area is not true. You can go to
Okay.
the one you want.
and where's the closest one in Southern New Hampshire? Is it
Manchester.
Yeah,
Manchester?
Manchester would probably be it.
And that's still, you're talking like almost 45 minutes to an hour just to
Yeah.
get to the outskirts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than Jamaica Plain, but it's not
Yeah,
great.
right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's almost as bad as going to Boston.
right.
One of the things that I liked when you said it was assisted living. We had a veteran who just died at 99 years old that was a member of the Townsend Post. The only place they could put him up was Bedford. He's away from his family, he's away from all of us, although we do travel to Bedford quite often because that's part of our outreach program is to go to Bedford and do things. But if there was a facility like this in Townsend,
Yeah.
it would have been
Was
really
that,
great.
Was that Johnny?
Johnny Clark. It would have been great for him and his family.
Yeah.
Because it would have been right here. I mean, he was legally blind, but some of the people that knew him from here, when they started talking, he perked right up because he
Right.
knew who they were by the sound of his voice. So
Yeah.
it was something like that would be a big step in the
Yeah.
right direction.
Well,
just
and it's also fits into our plan of we want to keep people like that in
Right.
town.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, they're here and we want to keep their families here too.
Yeah, and it would ease up on the psychological and emotional stress.
Yeah.
Right.
So just to let you know what Fitchburg is merely a doctor's office.
Okay.
They do blood work there and stuff like that, but nothing else.
Nothing
It's
else,
just,
okay.
it's a great facility.
Yeah, it's just a satellite.
But just
I can't
small.
say enough for them. I
Yeah.
started on VA medical benefits just a few
It's so
months ago.
crazy there isn't one like in Lowell or something. I mean, you would have thought Lowell would have had some sort of facility
Oh, I don't want
too.
to go to Lowell. Don't make a move from Pittsburgh to Lowell.
No, not for here, but I mean a
No,
bigger,
additionally.
a bigger
Yeah.
facility. But
Again, it falls down to the ability of the space for the type
Right.
of facilities and care that you're going to need. That's why they're all based out more in the big cities because
Right.
they have the area to handle it, whereas here, you don't have that much space of land to put them on.
Right,
Right.
and part of what we have been looking at, especially with veterans housing, is that to appropriate a lot of the funding, you do have to provide some sort of space for these services.
Yeah.
And it would provide for those services for us to be able to get the funds to do it. So all of that would be looked at, you know, before anything else.
yeah,
What-
I mean, especially like we're saying a lot of, I mean, what the invisible wounds that are really seeming to be prevalent in the most recent wars, especially that are causing the suicides and stuff. Especially if we're going to have younger vets there, we want to make sure that you know we have the services for them as well. One thing I just did want to say because it's sort of an interesting. Dichotomy. So I spent a couple of years while I've been at the State House. I was on the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee for a couple of years. But I got to tell you, that's like a real plum job. Everybody wants to be on that, so they don't let you stay on it sometimes for that long. But one of the things that came to my attention is that in probably no other committee in the State House is it more prevalent than in this, is the breakdown between federal and state. Okay, so Massachusetts of state programs for veterans ranks first in the nation. Now, I hope they don't break their arm patting themselves on the back because they're not that great at it. So being number one isn't really that impressive if you're not that good at it. I mean, we're doing what we can, but we could certainly be doing a lot more. So we can't affect so much the hospital end of it, the locations of the Veterans Administration hospitals and such. The only things we can do are those peripheral things, like the transportation, and then of course we have our own housing and facility type projects like in Chelsea and out in, I think it's Long Meadow, we have a pretty large one out there, that are just completely state funded. We do them in their entirety. But the access to the hospital, as far as getting one closer, Massachusetts is probably never going to be able to do for us. But the transportation services are probably within our state, potentially within our state budget items. So that's something that when we start to really put, some meat on the bones of this project, and Secretary Urana's office has reached out to me several times saying, how is the project going? Is it moving along? Have you talked to John Radka? Things like that, just to make sure we do keep moving it along, because they're happy for us to have this project. But then we really need to reach out to them and say, yeah, you need to provide some shuttle services for us and things like that. Plus, there are some services that, I know that there are some services that veterans actually do, I don't know if it's the Wounded Warriors or someone does the medication drops for people that, they're volunteer groups, they're not state funded, but they're volunteers. But I think we need to look at what other might be out there, access to other transportation, because no one who's got stage 4 cancer should be driving themselves to Jamaica Plain, period. Even if we got the American Cancer Society involved,
But
no
one of
one
the
should be
things that
doing
we could look at, and I think this would be a benefit, again, we have over 600 veterans here in Townsend alone. If we're going to build this facility
Yeah, I
out at
really
Atwood
have to bring that
Acres, if we're building that facility at Atwood Acres, why don't we bring in, and I'm sure the Secretary, Francisco, could help us on this one, and that is, why don't we bring a doctor team like they have in Fitchburg into Townsend? One, that individual's here for the people living in those buildings that they don't have to go far. Talking about you want to keep services close, what better than having a medical facility? And I'm not talking a hospital, I'm talking about a doctor's office with maybe blood capability, maybe x-ray capability. The minor stuff, the minimum. I'll tell you, if you put that in Townsend, then I'm telling you now, Keith Jackson would move from Bedford to that doctor here in the town.
Right.
And if I
But
do
that, I think, is a federal issue. I think that's the problem. That kind of thing, that kind of services comes from the Veterans Administration federally.
understand.
So we can ask Secretary Urana, is there anything in the pipeline? Can we try to get something in the pipeline
Right.
for rural outreach? Because basically, we're in a less populated area of Massachusetts, but we're nothing like South Dakota. You know what I mean? There's far more rural areas than this, that they must be getting the services to these people somehow. So I will take that as an
But
action item.
keep in mind, that 600 is Townsend. I didn't talk about Ashby, I didn't
Right.
talk about Pepperell.
No,
I didn't
right.
talk about Lunenburg.
Yeah.
Now, if you start looking at pulling all those in, I think we're in the I know
Yeah.
we exceed the thousands at that point. I think selling that service and bringing it up to Francisco, I'm positive that he would actually look at it.
Right.
And he would work it on the federal side.
Well, that's what we have to do. We have to get him engaged to work it on the federal level for us, because, what's to say somebody from Bedford can't do 1 or 2 days out here, something
That would
like
work
that.
also.
Yeah.
Well, I think going along with that, sometimes, the old saying, build it and they will come.
Yeah.
Right.
So fitting into the assisted living part and the affordable veteran housing and working in the town plan, great idea. Long overdue everywhere across the country. So some of those services may be not even like blood work, but in that facility have a meeting room or something that could be used as
Right.
a doctor's facility.
Right.
Or for a visiting, instead of bringing people down there, bring them
Right.
out here like Keith was saying, but I think getting into not just the doctor visits and the extreme ones like the stage 4 cancer and those kinds of things,
Right.
which are awful, but the, a counselor to come out once a month to visit, and veterans around here, especially those younger veterans that have been bearing the brunt of what we've been doing as a nation, to get those PTSD services. But I think if you think outside the box, and I think that's where what you portrayed here, is kind of carve some of it out and have it there available. So it's more on a medical
Right.
type grade. And then you can go and say,
Right.
look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Why don't you
What we
bring
have,
this to
yeah.
Townsend?
Right.
We're setting the agenda.
And
We're-
that's exactly what we're talking about. The services that I personally have been bringing forth to everybody here is having counselors available. All right, the invisible injuries that
Right.
we were talking about, PTSD, having counselors available 2 or 3 times a week would be good. If bringing in services like Quest Diagnostic that will draw blood and bring it to the labs to get it tested. It's not like we're going to have a full laboratory there, but they're going to have a spot where that they're going to go in and get their blood drawn, or whatever, as far as just the medical necessities are concerned, or having a doctor come up once or twice a week, for physicals or whatever, having a nurse available there, that kind of stuff in the beginning.
Well, I think you make a good point, and I think a lot of the assisted livings do have like a doctor-nurse office within them, and they have a nurse that's there like around the clock, but that's something too, like as you were talking, and Chaz has, been a really big advocate for the, invisible injury treatment is being a part of this. Maybe we can also look out to some independent places too and get their advice, saying, like you said, if we build it, they will come. So like, say we have the facility and you contract with somebody like Mass General's home base program, and say you can use this as your Central Mass outreach area, because a lot of people don't want to drive into Boston to go to Mass General, and they could maybe have something locally. So maybe within the bigger component building, we leave some allocated space so that we can entice, because we may do better with the private sector than we do with the public sector.
In each of the buildings that we have, in each of those buildings, we have segregated space for their common area, whether it's their game room or the laundry room or the office for the person that's running the building. There is space in both of those buildings that have been used for other things. And as we were talking, I was thinking that why don't we just allocate space in those buildings that we're going to construct to have space for the doctors to come in, and they can that's a space that could be used on a daily basis by a different service. Kathy?
I spoke with the architectural firm that designed Townsend Woods to find out if they have done veteran housing, and they do have some experience. I would like to talk with John about that, because then still get into the funding mechanism and what restrictions they have, but Greg Zorzi of Studio One has offered to come out, to put together some ideas for buildings, for a complex, and
They were
one of
great.
the things they did on Townsend Woods is there's a common area on each floor, laundry facilities on each
Yeah.
floor, and they also have like a personal care room where a nurse can come in, and I'm sure he can figure out a design that would do exactly what we've
Right.
been discussing.
And
And
have
because of
facility.
the population, we're concerned about aging in place, and
Right.
they'll be able to maybe start out in a townhouse, for instance, and as time progresses, they may need to
Well-
to
Studio One, if you've ever been in Townsend Woods, all the units are aging in place.
Yeah.
Certain ones are handicap accessible, but they're all aging in place. So then, if you become mobility impaired, there's lifting off of panels on the sink cabinet, and I can't remember the other one. And so you could stay right in the unit you were in, and I'm certain they could do the same.
Yep, and that's what we're
Design.
looking at. We're looking at, because we're also not only looking for the veterans, but we're also looking for their families too.
Correct.
And that's, I think, the one piece that you don't see that a lot nowadays, is the taking care of the family too.
Correct.
And we're trying to get, to look at it in a different view, like you were saying.
Russ, one of the things you started to say before was, don't forget the female veteran.
Yes.
You want to expound on that?
Keith and I have been down to Washington a couple of times to talk to the senators and representatives and the VA, and there's been a lot of bad things happen to female veterans. They come back, they're fighting now, and they lose legs and lose arms. And the VA at one time, and I don't know if that's been improved or not, but at one time they had male appendages that they put on females. So we had a female veteran from the state of Massachusetts with us, and she expounded on that. Keith can probably say more than I can about that.
We as a government, we as a military, the unique thing about Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of people lost body parts. And when it came to the amputees, we focused more on male soldiers. If you recall, many, many years ago, it was only a male all-army, which was primary male soldiers, or Navy, so forth and so on. You had a couple fields that had females, but majority of your front line was all male. And it took us a little bit to get through this, because when Iraq and Afghanistan was going on, the thought process at the VAs, even our government, was, hey, this is a male army. Well, that's not how we fight wars today. It's 360-degree battle. So you're fighting from all angles. Women are on the front line just as well as the males are. And not just amputees, but there's other things that women go through, especially psychological, that they need additional resources. And I do agree 100% with Russ. When we go through this, we need to make sure that we keep in mind that females have different needs than males. And it's really important, especially the ones that fought these last 10, 12 years. They know exactly what I'm talking about. If you go a little bit beyond that, unfortunately, they don't know, because we've never faced it as a country before, having females on the front line, and now we are, so we have a lot of adapting ourselves to do. And they run into problems. I mean, little things. I'll tell you, this is a small thing, but you know what? I guess it would kind of upset me too. If I'm a female, I'm at the doctor's office, and I'm the only person in there, and I'm a female now, and my name's Christine, and then they say, Mr. Tron, and that was, to me, that's wrong. You know what? She's a soldier, and they don't treat equally. So there is a lot of things that we have to make sure. That's just a small thing also, but there is a lot of things for females. We have to take care of the females.
So that seems to be like an adaptation that didn't occur.
Yeah.
To an extent of speaking.
In your management and leadership.
Well, no.
Isn't that part of training?
It is, but we ain't getting into that, because that has nothing to do with what we're doing
Right.
here. But what I am going to say is that, yes, us as a nation was not prepared for it. It was something that we had to learn. It was something that we had to overcome. It doesn't make our leaders bad. The leaders are doing their job. It's something that we didn't expect, nothing that we planned for. But now we know, and over the last many years, I've been to DC for the last 4 years. I go down every year, and Russ has gone with me. And when we sit down and talk to our leadership, it's important that when we fund the VA, we need to fund specifically for certain items for the females, so they get exactly the medical care that they deserve.
Yeah, it's going to be inclusive and adaptive, because it's almost like Keith was saying before. The thought process wasn't before, it was all male. The thought process has to adjust to remember that, females fight just as well and suffer just the same, with some differences, both physically and psychologically. That's why they have to be inclusive. We have to be adaptive to that inclusiveness.
So with all that you know about this area and the veterans that are in this area, what would you suggest to us would be our next step in getting information and their needs?
I have it,
You have it?
of course.
Is that what you said?
I have it.
Yeah, bring in a female veteran.
Yeah, but I have the information. I know that I have all the documentation. What we need to do is, we hit it. I totally agree. I agree exactly with Brian came up with a little while ago. It all ties it all together. We need to come up with, when we started, I heard needs dogs, and I'm sitting there saying, I don't see that being important.
Okay.
that would be one-on-one, each individual. But
Okay.
when you're looking at trying to group a whole bunch of people and saying, what are the services that we can take care of, all of them? And I think the psychological is probably the big piece, and a lot of the stuff for the females is more psychological than it is physical. And I'd be happy to talk off tape about female issues. That's why I'm not going to talk about it now.
Okay.
I think what you're trying to say is how would you, and I know Keith tapped in, because he's at the state level for the VFW, but maybe like a survey or something to Townsend, or
Right, well,
maybe
we-
even around us.
We were
Hampshire.
looking for numbers initially, and it was very difficult for us to look
Right.
at a population and say what is available in town. And tonight, this is the first time that we've heard
600 in town,
600
for
in
sure.
town.
Wait a second, hold up. You guys have a town agent. That's his job.
Oh, I
He
thought
should be
he
in
was
this
gonna.
meeting right now.
Well,
He
he was
said he was going to
invited.
be here. He was invited. He said he was, Joe said he was going to be here. I think something came up. I talked to him yesterday. He knew about it.
He should be here.
He was invited. He was, definitely. And obviously, there were a few other people that were invited as well.
I see that, I see that. And I
didn't
think
make
what
it.
we should do is we should have another meeting with those individuals here.
Okay.
Especially Joe, because Joe knows the veterans. He can reach out to all 600 veterans.
Right, and that's part of the reason why we're having this meeting tonight,
Correct.
is to say this is what we are working on, this is what we're looking for, and you know we the next meeting that we will have probably in 2 weeks, my assumption is, because that's how we've been running, is to have Mr. Radcliffe here so that we can get everything all together, that we can all be on the same page before we take the next step. You know, I think that's
And I
really
think the
important.
survey is good, but keep in mind one thing, when we send these surveys out. The surveys are gonna go to people that are living in Townsend, that are probably already, they have a place to live. They're there. They don't need these services. I'm saying majority, not saying all of them. So maybe taken just from Townsend isn't the only place. Maybe we can reach out beyond Townsend to get other areas understanding also.
I think that's part of what we're looking at to make sure that we have the right population, but B, the outreach to it. Because the people that are living in, that may have places now, you know, if something like this is available to them, they might be able to make a decision on moving.
I believe there's 63 units in Bedford right now,
Yeah.
Okay.
right at the Bedford VA.
So I believe that you're barking up the right tree
Yeah, I do.
with the presentation that you've given us tonight, and
Okay,
with
thank
with
you.
the kind of things that you're thinking about doing. I believe you're barking up the right tree.
Thank you.
Okay, so I do have a date for us, and I'll bring this to a close so that those in the audience or who may be viewing this on YouTube or another social media will know that we'll be meeting on Monday, August 21st at 7 p.m. The public will be invited, and Sheila, hopefully you will be here, and John will be able to join us, and we may be able to invite even perhaps Studio One to come, and hopefully Joe will be able to make that meeting, and we'll get more information at that time. If, in the meantime, if anyone from the public has any concerns or suggestions that they'd like to make to the committee, the board, Townsend Housing Authority, you can contact Michelle at Town Hall, and she'll write those down, or you can come to our next meeting on August 21st. Okay, thank you so much
Thank you.
to all of you for attending this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.